Yes, in a sense. The secret is human beings don't do what God creates out of nothingness, right? Human beings don't do that. We create out of something else. And so even when we create something that's like the modern, very materialistic Santa Claus, which is all about gifts and stuff, that comes from something else. And it does come from this character called Nicholas of Marna, which is a town in Turkey, basically. Yeah. He was bishop of Marna, and that's the origin of a lot of these elements of our Christmas story.
So let's start with what he did at Nicaea. How was he so fundamental to why Christianity is what it is today?
So, if you remember your worship service, we have two different creeds. We have the short one, which is the Apostles' Creed, which we say more often. Then we have the Nicene Creed, which is the longer one, and that gets said on High Holy Days. So, any day that's white or red, basically, is a good metric. That's almost always going to be a Nicene Creed Sunday.
So why is the Nicene Creed longer? Does it go into more detail about what a Christian is supposed to believe?
Yeah, it's got... The Nicene Creed was created to answer a question about how does Jesus' divinity and his humanity, because he's fully both, how do those relate? Is he like half human, half God? Kind of like Hercules? Is he is he like 3/4 God, 1/4 human? Is he almost God but not quite? What's the relationship there between those two things? So the second article, the part that talks about Jesus in the Nicene Creed, is much longer, and it's much longer because it's trying to answer the question: how is Jesus as a human being related to God the Father? And so in the end, what it says is they are of one substance. The Greek word is homoousios, right? They are of one substance with the Father. So Jesus and God are the same underlying being, if you will. And it goes in, so that's all that part about God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made. And that phrase was the key to the whole business, was Jesus was begotten, but there's no point where Jesus was not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, begotten but not made. He comes from the Father, but there's no point where he never existed.
What was the reason Nick and his posse of bishops had to meet and establish all this?
Well, because at this time there's a priest running around named Arius, and Arius is teaching the opposite of that begotten, not made line. He is teaching that there was a point where God the Father existed, but Jesus did not. And that what we call the second person of the Trinity, or the Son, was made. And that doesn't seem like a big issue. I know it seems like a really fine point of theology, but what Arius was basically saying was Jesus was almost God, but not quite.
Because he was not truly eternal.
Right, because he was not truly eternal. But the problem with Jesus being only God, like almost God, but not quite, is if he's almost God, then your sins are almost forgiven, on the cross. That for your sins to be forgiven, it has to be truly God incarnated in human form, dying on the cross, being raised again. And so it's an issue of the real issue at stake was if Jesus is almost God, then you're almost forgiven, but not quite. And everybody had a big deal. So this is a big debate. There's a huge debate in early Christianity. And Christianity solves problems by having big meetings. So we had a big meeting, and we called it the Council of Nicaea. And what happened is the Emperor Constantine got really tired of Christians fighting. And so he basically kind of kidnapped every bishop in the Roman Empire and said, I'm sticking you in a room. There's 100 guys with spears out front. Come to a conclusion.
Wow. So this wasn't just hey guys, let's take a business trip, go down and see Constantinople, maybe meet a couple times.
No, this was, I'm locking the doors. you will not exit until you fix all your issues.
Under pain of death.
Well, he didn't actually threaten to kill them, but
When you have armed guards out front.
right, when there's armed guards and the emperor is standing there being like, you're going to fix there's a kind of or else implied there, right? So Nicholas was one of the bishops. So Saint Nick, Santa Claus, was one of these bishops, and he was there, and he was one of the very much the anti-Arius bishops. There were kind of three camps. There was the pro-Arius bishops, the anti-Arius bishops, and kind of which were the vast majority, and the people in the middle who didn't think this was as big a deal as either camp was making it. And they had a big debate, and Nicholas was part of that. Legend says that Nicholas himself actually hit in the face one of the pro-Arius bishops at the council, actually.
So the image of Santa Claus as being a total...
Yeah, right.
Just good-natured, and that's it.
Right. There's a meme on Facebook that says, it's the icon of St. Nicholas, and it says, "I've come to bring presents and punch heretics, and I'm fresh out of presents." Okay, now I will tell you, that's a legend, and it's not a great legend, because actually if you think about it it's funny, but if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, we don't endorse punching people over theology questions.
Right.
That's bad. Don't do that, And so he probably didn't do that, that's kind of legend, and it probably wasn't there. But anyway, so that's the historical St. Nicholas. That's where we get. And we get the present giving part because in Marna, where he was bishop, he would basically drop down the chimney sacks of gold to poor families. He would gift money to poor families in Marna, and he became very well known for this.
And would he actually drop them down the chimney?
Yeah.
Or is in the mists of history?
Yeah, that's a mist of history. That's one where historical legend is sometimes more important than historical reality.
Yeah.
They didn't really have chimneys like we have them, and so it's really more like a hole in your roof, and so that probably was not how it worked, but it's a nice story.
Yeah.
And it works.
But the crux is he actually did give.
He was giving gifts to the poor, and that's the essence, So that's Saint Nick.
Cool. It's kind of nice to know that even that early on, that has that fundamental basis.
Yep.
Another Christmas question that always comes up to me is, and you've brought this up in sermons as we lead up to it. I mean, you make a big point about theologically how critical it is of how impoverished Joseph and Mary were.
Yeah.
I mean, destitute. And from a region of the empire that was destitute. Yeah. Poor people in a poor land.
Right.
So the three wise men come and they give them all this frankincense, which is valuable, myrrh, which is valuable, and gold, which is the value.
Right, right.
So how do you reconcile their continued life of poverty? Because 8 days later, is it 8 days they do the circumcision?
Yeah, they do the circumcision.
And then after that, they go to the temple,
right,
and present Jesus,
right,
and Joseph claims him as his son,
right.
But they're still dirt poor. They can only afford the 2 turtle dove sacrifice instead of the full-on lamb.
Right.
So what happened to all that gold, frankincense, and myrrh?
It's a good question.
Bad investments?
Right. I don't know. Yeah. Right. Maybe Joseph had a car loan or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, part of it is those are 2 different gospels, right?
Yeah.
And so, so only Luke has that story about the temple and the dedication, but the wise men come in Matthew, and so it's two different contexts. And also, I mean, we think it's a chest, but it doesn't say how much gold they brought him.
Here's a coin, kid. Don't spend it
right. Don't spend it all at once.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, the story doesn't say. The story doesn't even say that they were men or that there were 3 of them. It says there are 3 gifts. Could have been 100 of them traipsing across the desert.
So how do we get the the imagery of three
Well, because there's
magi.
there's three gifts, and so
Yeah.
we have this impression that
One each.
one each, but if you actually read the story in Matthew carefully, it doesn't say anything about that there's three of them. It says magi came from the east bearing gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Okay. So all we know is it was plural.
Yeah, it was plural, and church tradition says there's three of them. They even got names in tradition, but
But the names aren't even in the Bible
no,
itself.
names aren't even in the Bible.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So what was a magus? Because today I think of a magus as a great, powerful wizard sitting in a medieval castle.
Right. Yeah. Gandalf. Right.
Yeah. Merlin.
They're probably astrologers, so they're probably Persian. They are Persian. The religion was probably Zoroastrian astrologers. These are people who thought, we think of astrology as it's this fun little thing you read in the newspaper. But for them, it was this terribly serious thing. It was the stars reveal to us what's happening, and so they're very serious people. They're ancient world astronomers in a certain way, and they're studying the stars for the future. And it's actually, so first, they're Gentiles, very obviously, and astrology is actually a practice banned by the Old Testament.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Why would we revere these astrologers if the Old Testament says
Right.
don't pay them heed?
So we haven't gotten here yet, but this is the big deal about Epiphany.
Okay.
So Epiphany is always on January 6th. And this is why it's a big deal, is because it's a sign of that this baby born is not just for these people in Judea, in Israel. That this is a gift to the whole world. And everybody's included in that gift, including the pagan, quasi-pagan, astrology nerds over in Persia. It's just as much for them as it is for the shepherds and for Mary and Joseph and all that good stuff. So that's the point Matthew's trying to make, is that this promise that God makes is opened up to all nations, not just the local people.
Even for people up until now, we were told to kind of ignore.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right, exactly. That the promise is, Gospel will later say, Paul will later write, the promise is for you, for those who are close by and those who are far away. And I kind of think about, it's a good way to think about it, that it is for those who are close by, it's for those who are in the room, it is for the Jews, it is for Christians, but it's also for those who you think are far away, whether that's distance or whether that's socially, that there are lots of very distant people, socially speaking, and the promise is for them too.
Well, given that, is it possible that there really isn't a historical basis for the Magi, but they were more of an allegory, or that he was trying to use to say exactly that?
Yeah, they are a convenient point, I guess. I take the point of view that tradition is innocent until proven guilty, and so I see no reason to not believe, and so it's like, okay, fair enough, but I won't pretend that Matthew doesn't have an agenda there. He does, very clearly. So, yeah, I guess I kind of think there's no reason not to, so yes, as long as it's not proven that was wrong.
Well, what you've mentioned prior, that the whole point with the Council of Nicaea, you had the followers of Arius saying here's a start point for Jesus.
Yeah.
And then Nicaea concludes, no, he always existed.
Yeah.
Why then is Christmas such a big deal if it's not really the starting point? And what was Jesus doing before the physical manifestation, just kind of hanging out?
Yeah, right. Is he? So everybody should pay attention to John chapter 1 when we're doing the candle lighting, because we should probably make a distinction between Jesus and what we call the Word. So the second person of the Trinity, the Son, is the incarnate Word. And Christmas is a big deal because that's the day where the Word actually becomes incarnate. The Word becomes flesh, as John chapter 1 says, right?
Yeah.
The Word became flesh and lived among us.
As a physics guy, I always loved that line.
Yeah.
Because it was like the origin of the universe.
Right.
In a theological.
Right. So in the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and all things came into being through him. Says John. So before Jesus is born, he's the Word. The Greek term is logos. He's the logos. He's the logos of God. So the second person of the Trinity. Then when Jesus gets incarnated, he's Jesus. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so
it's almost, I don't know if this is quite the right term, but thinking in my Hindu studies, it's almost like he's an avatar of the Word.
Yeah, I mean, close. There's a Trinitarian heresy for that.
Of course. Leave it to me to be heretical in my thinking.
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's me.
You can't think about the Trinity and not be heretic, or the creed, the other creed that we never read that defines the Trinity says it is to be believed, not to be understood. So anytime you get beyond believing and trying to into understanding, you're usually wandering into a heresy.
So now we're getting kind of Zen.
Yeah, right. Well, it is because Christians believe the Trinity, and it's central to our faith because it illustrates how different God is from us. Every other faith, or a lot of other faiths, their gods or God is some Superman version of us.
Yeah.
This is Greek mythology's problem, right? Zeus isn't really God; he's just Superman with all the same problems.
The foibles, the emotions.
Right, the emotions, the failures, lots of failures, that a human person has. He's just also got lots of power.
Yeah.
And this is always the problem when people always want to talk about Superman and make Jesus comparisons. It's because Jesus, the point of the Trinity as a doctrine is that it's supposed to illustrate to us that Jesus and God the Father and the Holy Spirit, they exist in such a way that is so different from anything else in the world that it's really incomprehensible to us, that it's beyond what we can understand. So I guess I would say Jesus is fully God. There's a little diagram. Jesus is fully God, but he is not the Father, and he is not the Holy Spirit. And that's the way you got to parse it out. Three beings, one in essence. 3 in 1, 1 in 3.
Yeah. So you've got this ineffable, not humanly comprehensible situation.
Right. Something to be believed and not to be understood. Yeah. Because, again, it's trying to tell us how different Jesus is. Mm-hmm. How different Jesus' relationship to the Father is from us. It's a very different. The word in Greek is parachoresis. This is
beyond.
You do not have to know this to be Christian. I just want to be clear about that.
So we don't need to know the Greek and the Latin.
But the Greek word is parachoresis to describe the relationship. The word actually means dance.
Dance?
Yeah.
That's very cool.
And that's the image that they kind of use to describe the Trinity. It's like 3 dancing partners. But they are one. They are separate in a certain way, but they're also one in movement.
Yeah.
They're one united in dance, in movement together.
I love the image.
Yeah, it's actually that's if you want an image for how the Trinity works. They are so totally. The other way to put it is, they are so totally self-giving that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins.
Yeah.
But they're still distinct. They're distinct, but they are so totally self-giving of each other.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of love God has for us, is that same self-giving, so total that you can't really tell where one begins and one ends.
I like that. I can wrap my head around that.
Yeah, that's the best way to wrap your head around it.
I want to get light for a moment. Okay. Because that was very heavy.
It is very heavy, yes.
Back in just the light joyousness of the Christmas spirit, what is the tie between the Christmas tradition of the Christmas tree and Lutheranism?
So in general, actually, Christmas trees are a German tradition. I do know that much. They come out of a German tradition, and so in that sense, yes, there's a connection there between our German Lutheranism and trees and Christmas trees and all that good stuff. Yeah.
What about, you mentioned Epiphany earlier, and I'm by heritage Byzantine.
Yes.
And so Epiphany was when...
Epiphany is actually the day.
The day, yeah. Byzantine, or Russian Orthodox, all that. Why? Why Epiphany instead of...
Well, if you think about it, Epiphany is the day where they actually got the gifts.
Yeah.
Right? We give gifts at Christmas, and every child's play, Christmas scene on Earth, has three wise men at it.
Yeah.
But the three wise men weren't there till Epiphany. They weren't there till 2 weeks later. And so the reason there is because, that the gifts are actually given on Christmas. The other big thing is that the Orthodox calendar is exactly 13 days off from the Western calendar, and so their Christmas day always falls on what's Western Christianity's Epiphany. So that's the other difference, is because it's always 13 days off.
So it's like a double whammy to be...
Yeah, it's a double whammy.
January 6th.
Right. Yeah. So what us Western Christians are calling Christmas, or are calling Epiphany, they're calling Christmas, and then 2 weeks after that is Epiphany.
Gotcha.
So that's another source of confusion.
Okay. Yeah, in Italy, I think, was it Steganona? Is a witch who brings the gifts.
Yeah.
But she brings them on Epiphany, not on Christmas Day.
Yeah, right. And so, it makes sense, right? Because Epiphany is actually, again, the day that there was any gift giving,
that was on Epiphany.
It was on Epiphany. The shepherds don't bring gifts. Mary's in a stable. She doesn't. They've hauled themselves from Bethlehem. And they don't have gifts. The actual gifts were given on Epiphany. So.
Yeah. How long did they stay in the manger? Is there any indication of that?
No. They're there. They're there on January 6th at Epiphany.
Yeah.
And so they're at least there 2 weeks. Luke kind of makes it sound like they stayed there until that dedication ceremony, which would have been a little further out, like a month, and so it doesn't really give us a timeline there. Yeah. And then Matthew's hard because right after the wise men, they got to run to Egypt, and so my bet would be they're there for 2 weeks to a month, and then they got to hightail it to Egypt to get away from Herod.
And why the different attitude on Egypt? With the entirety of Exodus, Egypt is painted as this hugely villainous place, and yet it becomes apparent that not just there, but when I read some of the writings of the old rabbis, a couple millennia ago, it's obvious that Egypt was also seen as a haven, a safe haven. So why that?
In the Bible, Egypt is the place where the people of God go for safety.
Yeah.
But they're never supposed to stay there. And that's the key. The difference is in the staying, not in the going. Because they only get there because God tells them there's a famine. He tells Jacob and his family, there's a famine, go live in Egypt for a while.
Yeah.
And so as a theme, the people of God always end up going to Egypt, and then they always end up staying there a little bit too long, and God has to be like, okay, time to haul yourselves out of Egypt here and get moving. Like the old adage about in-laws. They're fine for 3 days, but after that, it's overstaying. After that, it's too much. No, exactly. I think that's exactly it. And it's a great place for safety. It's also a great place for comfortable prosperity. And that way it's kind of seductive to stay in Egypt. And so the question there for all of us is, what's our Egypt? What's your Egypt? What's my Egypt? Where's our place that we go for safety, but we're actually but staying there will seduce us, into comfortable prosperity that's bad. I can see that. I've read from historians, archaeologists, that Egypt, through much of its history, its ancient history, was viewed the way America is today. Yeah. Is that land of opportunity. Right.
And so I could see that seduction, go there
for
make
safety.
it big, but then
Right.
what the Bible is saying, after you do that,
Well,
once you know you're safe, get
after
out.
you've found your safety, it's time to, because God always calls people to live in precarious freedom, right? Actually, like the way God calls the people of Israel to live is free, but it's very precarious. They are free in Egypt, but boy, are they not. Their material life just exists on an edge.
Yeah.
And God calls us to the same thing. And I actually think this is, for a long time, been one of the problems in the church, is that we've forgotten that we're called to precarious freedom, not all that Egypt seduces us with, which is safety and security at the cost of freedom. So that's a thing we always need to be thinking about.
Yeah. Wow. All right, one more heavy question.
Mm-hmm.
Heavy-ish. This has struck me, ever since I was a little kid, when the Magnificat came around.
Yeah.
Whether I was hearing it from the Byzantine side, the Roman Catholic side, the Lutheran side, Magnificat came around, and I always wondered who was there taking dictation when Mary said that. And there are various elements of the Bible, especially in the New Testament. I can see after Jesus' ministry starts, he's got followers, plenty of people to hear him and document what he said.
Yeah.
But up till then, where are these traditions coming from? How do we know what Mary said in the Magnificat?
Yeah.
Or is it just a prayer we ascribe to her for convenience sake?
Yeah, there's different ways to think about it. So tradition says one of Luke's main sources is Mary. Luke
herself, Mary the mother.
Yeah, Mary, like herself. That's where Luke. Read Luke 1 verses 1 to 4. We never read it because it's Luke's notes.
It's like his preamble.
Yeah, it's his preamble, and it's really boring. But it's actually kind of interesting too. I could never preach it, but it's interesting because he talks about who the book is dedicated to. Which tells us.
It's our buddy Theophilus, right?
Yeah, our buddy Theophilus, which tells us that Theophilus had a lot of money, because that's how it worked in the ancient world. Some rich person sponsored a person to write a book.
So he was Luke's patron.
Right. So this dude has a lot of money. He's paying Luke to write this book. He's paying Luke to write this book so that Theophilus can understand what the Christian story is. And then Luke talks about how he did interviews, and how he got sources. And so, at least from Luke's perspective, it's something that it's a source that he seems to have, and tradition says Mary's one of those sources. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, I got this from Mary. There's no Wikipedia blue footnote that you can hover over.
Yeah.
So you can, again, innocent until proven guilty. Sure. I have no reason not to believe that.
Yeah.
In a certain way, I'm going to ruin ancient history for everybody. We actually don't have what a direct thing a single person said in the ancient world. We have all sorts of speeches. We think, Pericles, right?
Yeah.
And the death of the Athenian soldiers, and we think we have all these speeches from history. Ancient historians had no problem sticking words in people's mouth if they thought you should have said it. And so in another sense, for a lot of these things, like the Magnificat's highly stylized based on other songs women have sung in the Old Testament. So if you go back and you read Hannah's song, which is in 1 Samuel, like chapter 2 or something like that, at the birth of Samuel, Hannah sings a song that's remarkably similar to the Magnificat, and you can tell Luke's stylizing this song based off other songs that women have sung in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I don't think that makes it wrong. The song is about what God has done, and what God has done in Jesus is shown in that song. And that song reflects other work that God has done throughout the rest of the story. And so it's a complicated thing. I think Mary could have directly sung it, but even if she didn't, it's still true.
Yeah. She might have just said, I sang my praises, and Luke said,
right.
Yeah, I'll adapt this.
Right, here's a great song, right. And I think it's work that God is still doing. That's the beauty of the song.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we've got time for one more.
Mm-hmm.
And for a change of pace,
Yeah.
what would you like to make clear? What question would you like to answer? We've done a bunch of these Q&As.
What question would I like to answer?
Yeah, I'm always asking other people. I'm asking questions.
Oh, man.
Yeah, what was one of the things that was a real epiphany for you? Yeah, you had a question, and when you got to seminary, it was answered and it just blew your mind. Preferably Christmas related.
Preferably. So I have this story. This is a story. How much time do we have?
Oh, as much as you need for the story.
Okay. So when I was at First English, I did MIC like Cole did with us. I did it at First English, our sister church.
Oh, okay.
And when I was there, the big thing at First English was this live nativity scene Christmas pageant, right? And it was this. It wasn't even it was like on a Sunday night. It was a huge thing. There was a taiko drummer. There was like choir productions. It was a big thing. But the whole thing was centered around, you'd have these bits like the taiko drummer in between scenes of a nativity play, basically. Mm-hmm. And it ended on a live nativity scene with real animals, goats, sheep. And my first year at First English, the big thing was we were going to have a camel, Moses the camel, was going to be there. It was in all the advertisements. It was,
so it was publicized.
Right, it was publicized.
Come to see, real camel.
Right, yeah, it was featuring a live camel. So I get to this thing, and it's been freezing rain outside, all day. And Pastor Bob, who was pastor there at the time, walked up to me and goes, "Dave, it's freezing rain outside." I go, "Okay, Bob, what do you want me to do about that?" He goes, "Camels can't come outside in freezing rain, evidently."
A little known fact about camels I did not know.
I didn't know that either. I'm like, "Okay, Bob, what do you want me to do about that?" I kid you not. He looked at me dead in the eye and he went, "I've got a camel suit in the back of my car. I need you to go put it on."
He just happened to have a camel suit?
Of course, he just happened to have a camel suit. To this day, I do not know whether the whole camel thing was just a joke and I was always going to be the front half of the camel, or whether, Bob carries a camel suit in the back of his car. Anyway, and I must have looked at him like he was crazy, because he said, "Dave, I promised these people a camel, and by God, we're going to give them a camel." So there are many other facts I can go on with. I have a lot of parts to this story, but so the end part of this story is I dragoon a high schooler to be the back half, because it's a 2-person camel suit. He said, "Why do I got to be the back half?" I'm like, "Because I'm in seminary, so I pull rank." So I'm the front half of this camel. I've got this camel suit front half. I'm walking up the main aisle. There's sheep and there's goats. Walking up the main aisle of this church. Sheep and goats are doing indoors what they do outdoors, so they're pooping all over the floor in the sanctuary. There's straw everywhere. There's the noises that camels make. And you walk up, and I had this epiphany that there is no dignity in this life in Christ. And there's no dignity to this Christmas story, and there's no dignity to this life of Christ. And I mean that. And I don't mean it as I'm resentful about it, but I think we imagine that there's some dignity to this life that we're called to.
Yeah.
And there's really not. I'm sorry. We're not called to be respectable, and we're not called to be normal, and we're not called to be dignified. We're actually called to it's a very undignified faith in a very undignified moment of this Christmas. So
we're the dregs and we're proud of it.
Well, right. I mean, we're not respectable, and I think we forget that. I think we think being Christian means being respectable, and from that moment on, I've just had it's nice if we are respectable, but boy, is that not a goal. The goal is to be the front half of the camel costume in a very smelly sanctuary. There are other parts of the. I will tell other parts of the camel story, but later. But
Reminds me of that line from a sci-fi book of all things that God is like water; He flows to the lowest places.
yeah, exactly, and that's what it is with this God, and that's what it is with this faith, and there's nothing you can do about it, and any attempt to be dignified automatically gets you off track,
Yeah.
If you're more concerned about being fussy than you are the faith, it's a problem. So
That's an excellent Christmas message to end on.
there we go. It's my camel story.
Thank you.
Yeah. There are many parts to it, Kate.
Yeah, be ready. I may be probing about those other parts.
Yeah, there's a part 2 and a part 3, but yeah.
All right, I'm going to hold on to those for the next time I forget my question list.
Right. Yeah, we can do it over the next couple of weeks.
Cool. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah.
We have a couple of quick notes. If you happen to watch this live or in recorded versions within the next 24 hours, we have Blue Christmas tomorrow night.
Yep.
At 7 p.m.
Yep.
And that is for people who have to struggle with loss and other bad things at a time when the rest of the world seems to be running around just totally joyful.
Yep.
Life is not a Hallmark Channel special, and Blue Christmas is all about that.
Yep. Blue Christmas. It's about acknowledging that maybe you're not joyful at Christmas, and that's okay.
So join us if you can live here at Resurrection tomorrow at 7. It won't be online, so come in person.
Yep. Thank you, folks.
And outside of that, have a great week.
Yeah, have a great week. Merry Christmas.
Bye.